it's the age-old story really about from refereeing. Got injured, still wanted to be involved, and somebody pointed me in that direction rather than that one. And lots of people get into coaching or doing something else. I ended up with a whistle in my hand. And look, everything since that point has led to today. And I'm so fortunate when I think back of a working week and think, look, grief, I get paid for this, and I get to kind of have a role in the game.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Trauma, Training and Transformation, the space where we explore movement heals the mind. And today we've got a really special guest, Keith Lewis, whose work with rugbyreferee.net allows referees to communicate, engage and share lived experiences online, especially when we're trying to grow the game of rugby from the referee's perspective. Also part of Keith's day-to-day life is working with the World Rugby and to develop laws. So Keith, for the benefit of our audience, please introduce yourself.
Hi James Alder, it's great to be in and good to have this conversation. Yeah, I mean, look, I like both of us think, or many of your listeners, I've been in rugby since I was a kid playing at school. Realised very, very quickly that I was going to be no loss to the playing fraternity. And listening back to some previous guests of yours would never have got anywhere close to that. So I got injured at school, started refereeing, the age-old story, but I benefited from doing that when I was 17. Helped out some bits and pieces at school in a school rugby competition, and thought, well, this might be a way of doing a bit more. Did the referee course, and it kind of went from there. So that was 1997. And then kind of took a very slow and gradual approach to rise up through the refereeing system in England. Was really fortunate to meet a whole bunch of great people along the way, and got to championship level on the field. So refereeing the sort of games, or sort of Worcester, Bedford, London, Exeter, as they were going through the league. So got to a really good standard, but realised at the age that I was then that I was never going to make the step up into the professional game. At the time, there's only a handful of sort of referee contracts out there, and the reality is I was not going to get one of them. So kind of peaked there on field. Then kind of a year or so later, after sort of doing some coming back through and doing national panel games for the RFU, I got a phone call from Ed Morrison to say we need some more TMOs because we're upping the investment in the television match officials in the Premiership, because they only had 2 or 3 at the time, because there was only one televised match a weekend, obviously doing that investment. So I did 7 years in the TMO truck before all that kind of eased off. So that's the kind of the rugby side. You mentioned rugbyreferee.net. That was a side hustle that I kind of set up in 2012 because I was so frustrated as a relatively senior on-field referee. Couldn't find any information about refereeing. There was no central place but to put stuff, find information out. You hear, what the jungle drums are like in rugby. You might hear about something over here and you never get to see it. And my wife said to me, "I'll just do it yourself then." And so that story was born. The website's been up and running and all that kind of thing. We've developed a really solid viewership of that. I do sort of weekly appointments around the world. Any news that does come out about refereeing and how we referee and laws and things like that. Got a really active Facebook group. So we've got 5,000 referees in there, which is a great resource, great community. And I love that element about refereeing. I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but we're often out there on our own. I'm out there on my own refereeing now. The glory days of the championship are gone, and I'm running around at the weekend just as you are and others do on my own. So that having that community around us, I think, is really important. And then all those kind of things collided, and I was really fortunate to get this role at World Rugby 3 years ago now. A new role in the game to look after the law book, which is obviously mixing business with pleasure all the way through. So yes, I'm day-to-day responsible for that, but off-field still actively refereeing. I look after referees at my local club and all those sorts of stuff. So yeah, there's a very long answer and the kind of the full story as to how we've got here.
Thank you very much. For a long time, I've wanted to have this conversation with you. Being in Hampshire Referee Society, you've always been a beacon for many referees in the community to go high as much as possible. And you're evident to that being a referee in the championship. However, it's not always about that. It's about the grassroots community, the volunteership of people who ensure that the game continues to go on. So what was the first introduction to refereeing? What was the real reason behind going from being a player or being a player coach to actually just being a referee.
It's the age-old story, really, about from refereeing. Got injured, still wanted to be involved, and somebody pointed me in that direction rather than that one. And lots of people get into coaching or doing something else. I ended up with a whistle in my hand. And look, everything since that point has led to today. And I'm so fortunate when I think back of a working week and think, like, grief, I get paid for this, and I get to kind of have a role in the game and sort of live and breathe. But as you say, it's so important that we support each other, and we have a growth of the game around the world, because there's all very well, we all know about the elite game and we all see it on TV, and we all have our issues with it, or our opinions about it, and everyone's got an opinion about rugby, and that's one of the other things I really like about it. But fundamentally, if we haven't got people out there running around with a rugby ball, the kids group, as the women and girls game, all through the community game, then that's not going to feed up into the top. So it's really important that we've got that rugby community out there still doing what it does.
A lot of clubs are trying to get some of their kids to become young officials. Are we doing enough collectively to do that? And do we have the right scaffold in place to ensure young people can make that conscious decision?
Are we doing enough? I don't think we'll ever do enough, because of the nature of rugby and the I guess the societal impact of where we are. We are an amateur game and a community game. Let's not hide that fact. I've got 2 teenage boys in my house. They've got peers who go out and referee football matches, and they make a handsome living out off the back of that. Kids nowadays, we don't get anything. So when you and I run around at the weekend in our local societies or helping out our club in the age grade game, we get nothing for that apart from a nice cup of coffee and a hot dog afterwards, if we're lucky. So there's that element to it. So how do we attract people in is always going to be a challenge with that context. And then the other issue that we've got is I guess having the right people, or the right volunteer structure around the game to support those young people as they do get into the game. And I've always been a little bit critical of how that's done, because there just aren't enough volunteers to do it. We've got the same people, when we look around our clubs, the same people volunteering all the time to do multiple roles. In my club, I can think of a handful of people who do more than one thing for the club, whereas other people don't. And how do we get more volunteers in through that? I guess we could also kind of use people like me who've perhaps been at the top and are now no longer there for whatever route, to come back in and support those. And I do a little bit of it around Hampshire, as you've mentioned, and even in my household. I've got son number 2 is doing his referee course in a few weeks' time, so I won't even make I'll just about scrape the top 3 of decent referees in my household soon. So that'll be good. But yeah, I think we've got to keep working hard, encouraging people to stay in rugby by that route. It's easy. We know there is a drop off in the male game at post academy, post Colts, where people fall off rugby. How do we keep them in the game? I got lucky with what happened to me. I moved schools and it needed some space to fill in my school, in my sixth form calendar, and then the opportunity presented itself, and then I kind of grabbed hold of it, which is my want. I'll do that anyway. Anything that lands on my plate, I'll have a go at it. And it kind of worked. But yeah, we've got to keep working really hard to do that, attracting people in, and then, as you said, have a scaffolding around to support them when they do that. And I don't think we're brilliant at that, to be honest.
Well, young athletes growing up, they always wanted footsteps of one of the role models, be it football, or rugby, whatever it may be. But the development gets to a point where they rather push on, be it an international player potentially, or they leave the game. And I think it's that point you rightly mentioned. There's a drop-off post academy age, cult age, but we can identify people at that stage. We can then provide the correct support, be it financial or incentive, or just the mental health side of life, where they feel more confident to make that decision, because peer pressure can be very judgmental. So at grassroots level, what can we do at that stage through RFU or through our local communities to make it a going venture for our young athletes?
I think the first thing is we need to know who they are. And that's the challenge with our structure in England, is sometimes people might do a course, the RFU course, but then we locally don't really get the benefit of seeing those people again. We may not even know that they exist. So there's a disconnect there. And I know that all the societies are working really hard on that to at least get hold of them. And once you know who they are, then it becomes a bespoke operation, depending on who they are, where they are, what age they've got, what club they're at, what support network there is in club. One of the ideas that I'm going to do off the back of the course coming up is to kind of take that young official, or even those that come out in my club, and give them a more structured process for getting out on the field. It's very easy to do a course, but then when you go back to your club and you are 15, 16, 17, when you want to do something, what next? And what happens on that first day when you're there? Who have you got with you on your side? The society are great. Once you get into the society, then there are people within the referee society who will go and support. And I know Hampshire, we're doing a little bit more around that to kind of work using our society coaches and our match official observers and the assessors and all of those sorts of people who are out, who are great out there. And we need to kind of link those two things together so we can support and develop. But I think we've kind of got to, as clubs, wrap our arms around those people who wanting to. They're making a big step. It's not easy being a referee in our game, and that's something I think we often apologise for. And I've just done it, and I have to check myself every time I do. Rugby is a complex game. If it wasn't a complex game, it wouldn't be rugby. But all the things that make our game really great also make it complex, which therefore makes it trickier to officiate and referee. So taking anybody stepping over that whitewash with a whistle in their hand has a challenge in front of them, and that takes a particular type of makeup to do, but then it needs a particular type of support around it. To work with them, identify what the challenges are, watch them and coach them, and that's again who does that, and where are those volunteers to do that, and do they have the right skill set to do that? And that's something I'm going to have to learn. I've never done that before, really. So all those things need to piece together to do it, and hopefully, as you say, we can get people out. They're still involved in rugby. We can look after them. And that's not just referees. That's clubs, coaches, players need to look after the referees that they've got on their field as well, so that they keep coming back. Because if they don't, then we've got a bigger problem.
Not very much so. And once we've identified potential candidates to be match officials, that's one stage. Doing the course is the next. But then once we send these individuals out, the support's got to continue. But how does being a match official shape those individuals, the behaviours, the personalities, and the culture of the game, especially when we send them out on their own to referee for the first time?
It's a great question. I mean, we're a sport built around culture, and that's really inclusive and really welcoming, and that's something we need to just make sure that we work really hard at to maintain, because that's one of the great things that we love about rugby is that we can walk into a club anywhere in the world and we've got a friend, and with friendly faces there who will look after us, and that's just anyone, whether you're a player or official, whatever it might be. You look for those white posts when you're on holiday. You've got somewhere to go if you need something. So we've got to work really hard at doing that. And sometimes you've got to let nature do its own thing. When people go out there, they need to develop themselves, and they need to think about what they're trying to do as referees and how they're trying to facilitate the game. What type of referee are you going to be? How are you going to approach that game? All very well knowing the law book, and I'm fortunate that's my job to know the law book. There are many referees out there who don't know the laws inside out, but are brilliant referees because they can manage what's in front of them. They can communicate with the players. They can empathise with what the players are trying to do and facilitate the game, which is ultimately what we've got. We've got 30, 35, 36 people on our pitches, around our pitches on a Saturday or a Sunday who want to play rugby. So how do we, as the one in the middle with a referee, facilitate that, appreciating and empathising with all the things that they're trying to do and all the other 35 other players are trying to do as well in their own way? And that's a skill set that's not very easy, but I've loved doing that over my time, and I use rugby and refereeing experiences all the time when I'm talking to other people in the jobs market, in workplaces, in business. All those things are great, and I remember did one interview. I never actually gave a good example from I never gave a good example at all from business, but I was able to talk about how I was developing teams quickly, how I was dealing with difficult situations, how I was managing difficult people by virtue of my refereeing and that sort of thing. And that's whatever level it is.
I totally agree. But if we look back at the grassroots level, be it whatever age group you can look at, what happens if we stop supporting or don't support grassroots officials? What happens then?
We lose the ones that we've got, and we fail to attract new ones coming through the door, and we can afford to do neither of those two things as a sport. And for all the reasons that one of the reasons that we've talked about before, people have got loads of choice now to do other things. We obviously went through the pandemic period a couple of years ago of people realising that rugby wasn't available, so they stopped doing it. And lots of people didn't come back. And that's just life. And now people are realising that, having been through that experience, that perhaps their own lives look different, feel different. They want to do different things, and they want to focus on different areas. And that's brilliant. But we've all still got that job to do in getting people to come through the door. And I talk a lot about the match experience from a refereeing perspective. I do a lot of age grade games now, because with the job on during the sort of Monday to Friday and with the boys at rugby on a Sunday, I generally have Saturday off as a non-rugby rugby day for my own sanity. Very rarely happens, but in reality. But when I'm refereeing on a Sunday, the experience that I can give those 14s, 15s, 16s age groups helps them to keep in love with the game. I wonder whether you've got a view on this. I often wonder to myself how many people we lose from playing because of a poor match officiating experience they've got. If the game isn't refereed in the way that I like to referee, and the way the game isn't, if you don't get a good game of rugby, if you don't empathise and you just end up annoying people or making decisions that no one can buy into, then you lose the 30 people on the field, those around the field, and therefore the rugby experience they get might be diminished because of refereeing. And I think we can play a part in stopping that. If people are going to leave rugby, they're going to leave rugby for whatever reason, myriad reasons that might be the case. I would hate to think that refereeing is one of the reasons that a player would stop playing. So we've just got to keep working really hard.
No, completely. I think be it a referee or a coach, I think we have a responsibility for our product. And we're talking about rugby now, but you could transfer that to any sport, really. The coach needs to be, he's accountable, they're under pressure. I think as match officials, we have to have a level of empathy for those. And also the players, this might be the difference with them getting promoted or getting relegated. We're not under those pressures as match officials. However, that's not diminishing the accountability of the match official too. They're only humans. You know, they go out on their own most days, free in a game. They can only perform as good as they are. So they're under their own self with criticism, so to speak. But I agree, I think some players or even coaches may leave the game, or some match officials may leave the game just due to a bad day in the office, some abuse, not feeling supported, not enjoying the game anymore. You're right, there's many reasons, but I think...
Look, we make mistakes. 100%. Every game I make mistakes. At the top level, I made mistakes, and it's how you deal with those as an individual can make or break what happens next. I tell us the tale of a championship level game where I made an absolute howler that could have cost one team the cost of being in the Premiership by ending the game on what was a law error. A scrum collapsed, attacking 5 metre scrum. I ended the game when the scrum collapsed. That team, that was wrong. That team, had they won that scrum, had they scored off that scrum, that would have changed the result of that match, and therefore what happens in a league system off the back of that. And I realised really, really quickly that I'd made that mistake because I had the coach on my shoulder politely making that point, and it was done very, very well by that coach, and I've still got a good working relationship with them now. But how I dealt with that could have ended my career, or it could not have done. And the fact that we're having this conversation shows you what happened. So we make those mistakes. We hold ourselves to account as referees every single time. And you suggest, I don't know whether you meant to do that, but I think we as referees, when we're involved in games, do have that pressures that the teams do, because if we've done our prep right and we know what the game is that we're going into, we understand those pressures from the start. I know when I'm going into a game, if I've got a decider at the top or at the bottom, or often some of those games that sit just above relegation or just below the promotion, those sort of top, just neithers. Sometimes you look at those and go, why have they given me that game? But actually those could be the most important games, because a loss in that game could put someone in relegation spot, or could put someone in promotion game, or puts them in a good lead up to their next game. So that all those factors bear in, and how we approach games as referees, that's part of the prep that we should all do, at whatever level. Of course, it's different. The high up, it's easier to do that. It's less, using air quotes for the listener, it's less important in some of the games that we might referee of a weekend, but the players don't think it's less important. It's their game that they're trying to get out of their league or into their cup competition. So it's just as important that we prep for those scenarios and what might happen, and therefore referee that game in the way that it needs to be refereed on that particular day.
I think the point I'm trying to make was, we have empathy for those in our audience, but often that's not mirrored, and due to the fact that they think that a referee just turns up without those pressures, they just come in, refereeing the game, they can leave. But yet we're all very diligent individuals, pre-game, often getting observed to be assessed. So you're under those pressures. And I can only speak for myself. My performances stay with me quite harsh after a game. I'm probably my worst critic, in the sense I often evaluate my own performances regardless of the match observation, because I always think, well, yeah, I could have done that better. I moved too early here, I could have spoke, and we do that. It's natural. But We're mature individuals, so we've got a lot of life experience that's grounded us in those abilities. But we look at the grassroots level, what could be the biggest challenges for a new referee today, especially with one, changes in society? People transfer sports more freely these days than once was. So what do you think the biggest challenges the match official would face today, both at grassroots and the community game?
I think getting going is the hardest thing because of all the stuff that goes with it, and the game, the complex, and belief is the one thing. It's really hard to give someone the belief that they can do it without them experiencing it. I see that with the boys, is that they don't believe they can do it because they've never done it. They don't have that experience of just getting out there, and they kind of, people rugby, I think, always seem to expect perfection from referees. That's at the top and at the bottom, and therefore that viewpoint of what a referee should do and should be is really hard for someone that's new, because they don't know, they haven't developed the stuff that I've been talking about, that you've been talking about. All they know is their experience of the game and the laws, if they've read the law book. Obviously, it's part of doing the course, you're supposed to do that, and you go through it. But knowing what it says and knowing how to implement it is two very, very different things. And that comes with experience. So getting people going is the hardest thing. And the second one is a word I use more than any other when I'm talking to new referees, and that's presence. Whatever that looks like for you in different forms, being present around that game and having, even before you get onto the field, how you turn up, how you walk through that door, how you have your first interaction with the person at the door, whether it's the team manager, the coach, or the captain, and then getting out there. Are you present and doing the right things around each of the game scenarios once you've blown the whistle as you go through the game? And presence is a word I will always come back to with referees. It's having the right presence and delivering whatever it is you're doing in the right way to influence what you want to happen next. We're all about influence as match officials. The last thing I want to do is blow my whistle after we've started a game. If I can stop my whistle from going because I can play advantage, I can manage a tackler out of the way, I can manage and communicate with players arriving into a tackle area to stay on their feet, that means I don't have to blow my whistle, and that's a result all round. Sometimes we all need the whistle to go because we need a break. And as we get more, you use the word mature, I'll stick with that. As we get more mature, we need more breaks in the game so that we get a breather. And that's just part of how we do it, how we kind of referee and having the presence around there to kind of get the players that are in front of us to do what we want them to do in order to keep playing the game that they want to play. And that's a big challenge. So say a belief to start with, and presence once you're there, is two things that I always come back to.
You touched earlier on there about we're losing players through bad match officiating or poor games being managed. But if we turn that on their head to match officials, young or old, people don't realise sometimes the pressures that referees turn up to do games are under for various reasons. The increase of match abuse during post games has increased over recent times, and often a referee turning up doing a game, the pressures that they're under can be misunderstood. So why do you think these pressures, these circumstances affect match officials on game day? And also, do you think we've seen many good referees or potential referees walk away from the game due to these pressures?
Blimey, that's a big old question, isn't it? Yeah, I think ultimately we do lose people for any number of reasons, and those pressures are often nothing to do with rugby. As we coming through, I think when I started and I met my wife and all those things that you do as you're developing a relationship and moving around the country and growing families and working, progressing career routes for you both, then there are always pressures there. And for 99.5% of us out there involved in rugby, we don't get paid for it. This is our hobby that we do as an outlet to keep fit, to sort our mental health, to give something back to the game, whatever your reason for doing it, that's what it is. And we have to remember that that's why we're there. And often, I don't think we as referees and the match official community does enough to talk about this. You talk about accountability and the pressures that we have, that we're going through. I think people just expect a referee to sit up and do a great job. They don't appreciate that I've just had a really bad week at work and I'm coming into this because I want a run out and to get my mind away from it. I was really good at flicking the switch, going from work Keith to rugby Keith and referee Keith. That's just the way my brain was able to work, and that's me. Many other people we know aren't like that. They will carry the week with them into the weekend, and that will affect how they referee, how they approach a game and therefore how they referee it. Sometimes and that's the good thing about a good coach. If you've got somebody who can be, or a mentor, whatever that might look like, if you've got someone who can see you regularly, they will identify whether that's a competency issue or whether it's a mindset or there's something else going on. I remember a great fella that I was coached by when I first got onto the panel. He watched me do a game and said, "Tell me what happened this week," because he knew, having seen me 3 times already, that what he just watched wasn't about the game in front of me. It was about what had happened 6 days before that. It was a great question, and it was a great sign of him asking that question. The right question at the right time is really important for that. I think we've just got to. And then we as referees somehow have to find a way of switching off life and switching on to rugby, which again is so easy to say on a podcast, but so hard to do. I used to use the journey in the car, and obviously some of those journeys are quite short now, but they used to be hours long as you're traipsing around the country at that level. You used to have that time to kind of switch into rugby mode. I mean, a good thing nowadays with the different forms of media, you can flick on a rugby podcast and get your head into rugby mode very, very quickly. So I'd always encourage people to do that and try and have a switch that they do, have a process during the week that gets them into mode. And that's probably one thing that I've been all over the place, but my usual Saturday started on a Tuesday. The prep and the mental load for me was a Tuesday or Wednesday, when that phone call would come from a club to say, "See, you're down to referees this weekend. This is what you need to know, and we'll see you on Saturday." That moved into Wednesday. Where's my kit? Thursday, getting my kit bag ready. So Friday wasn't a problem if I was traveling on a Friday and that kind of stuff. Then it kind of builds up there. That switch is great. It's more of a slider than a switch, technology terms. But yeah, how we flick into rugby mode is probably something we need to think about as referees, and it's the same way the players do. We're no different to anyone else in a rugby club. When we rock up on a Saturday or a Sunday, everyone else has been through the same thing. So they've got their warm-up process as they're getting together with their teammates and doing their warm-up stuff. We're on our own. So have we got a process that we go through to kind of get our minds in? Have we got our warm-up set up? Have our kit bag right? The changing room set up right? All those things can help us to get into a good space in order to officiate effectively.
Oh, very much so. And thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people, and you included in this, use rugby to detox from a working week, as you rightly said, but also use it as a way of releasing some of those tensions, personally or professionally, to help unwind, and they use movement through rugby refereeing as that medium, really. But what mental strengths and tools have you grown from using refereeing? What have they allowed you then to use going forward in your professional life?
I'm really fortunate in that I've had a really positive mental. I don't have mental health concerns, issues, and things that other people have. So I'm really fortunate there, and I'm kind of always humbled when I hear podcasts about people who go through such trauma that you've talked about, previous guests on your podcast, and I've come through that and got to where they want to do. So all credit to everyone that does that. For me, I try and keep things really, really simple. Again, another coach I had we had a white and a fried egg scenario. When you get a piece of paper, draw what looks like a fried egg, you've got your yellow yolky bit and then the white bit that's much bigger around it. The stuff that I can influence is in the yellow. Anything I can't control is in the white. And that was a phrase he used, white egg. Can't worry about the M27 this weekend, because once I'm on it, I'm on it. I can yellow egg. I can leave enough time to get from A to B, and I can focus on. I can make sure my kit bag is ready, so that I worry about if I turn up to the club and I've got 2 teams with the same kit on, or the same color shirt that I've got three in my kit bag. Yellow egg. I can deal with that. I've got the answer in my bag. And so those sorts of really simple things, I worry about what I can control the controllables, isn't it? That old nugget. And then I tend not to worry too much about anything else, because I can't do anything about it, and I just get on. I've an internal mantra that I've always had is accept and move on. Can't do anything about it. If it's just happened, it's happened. So what happens next is the crucial bit. If I go back to my London Welsh story in the collapse scrum, it happened. I couldn't blow the final whistle and get everyone back out there. But what happened next was really important, as I said. So kind of accept and move on. I think that's a good way of parking stuff, and we do that on micro levels all the time during a game. And we don't hang. If we can let a decision go, even if we know it maybe not have been right as right as other people might think, if that makes sense. Then we've just got to get on to the next decision. And we make thousands of decisions in a game, whether it's with a whistle, with it deciding not to blow it, or where we might move to, all those micro decisions that we make, we have to keep making them, otherwise it becomes paralysis. So there's just a few little bits and pieces there that we've used. Movement, I think, is really important. So we talk about mental prep there. I have the same warm up now under 14s, under 15s as I did in the championship. I always do the same things. That's part of my getting my body ready to run around and do the thing I'm there to do, and that's part of my process. And I'll always do the same thing. I always do the small things, how you get changed, do it your way. My warm-up involves, one of the things I do as a warm-up is I run all 4 possible kickoff lines from the start. Blow an imaginary whistle and run those first 4 angles from centre, whichever way it might be, depending on who's going to kick off and go where. Why do I do that? Because I want to know where the pothole is I'm about to run through. Where's the divot that I haven't found? That's just it. Somebody said it once and I've done it. It works. You run that first line so that you've done it, but you've already done it. I've already done that prep. So when it happens with 30 players there, you know where you're going to end up. Variant with the ball and what the kick is and all that kind of stuff. But you've done that. You know where the dodgy bit of turf is that you need to run around because you've already prepped for it. So lots of little things that we can do to kind of help get there, get through it, get on it, and get through it successfully.
Many of our match officials are quite known to the clubs. So what can we do in relation to that preparation, but also that education for clubs to ensure that our match officials are not just accepted, but supported by communities?
Yeah, I think rugby's really good at this on the whole. The fact that we get a phone call during the week or a message to say, look, looking forward to seeing you, this is what you need to know, I think that's a really good and positive interaction point. I'll always do that. I always like to find out who I'm speaking to. I will always phone someone back if they send me a message like that, just because I want to chat. You can get some really good nuggets of information off that conversation that they don't realise is good intel. You might just get a feel for what happened last weekend, or we had a shocker last week, I had an issue last week, we had a red card last week, or we're looking forward to this game, we had 2 red cards last time. Really good information to get into. So yeah, I think I would always do that from a conversation perspective. But once we get there and how we support people, I think just having a space for referees to go to. I'm forever seeing on a Sunday refs posting pictures of their pre-match snacks or what's in their changing room, and it just makes us feel welcome to the game. I take my own, so again, part of the controllables, I know what drink I like, I know which jelly babies I want at half time. But if they've put a Mars bar out there and a drink, doesn't that make you feel just a little bit more welcome to the club than if they hadn't do that sort of thing? So look, I think rugby knows that we're there to help facilitate that game, and we often hear that line, no ref, no game. I'm not entirely sure I buy that, but I like it as a culture that we have, and they appreciate us turning up doing that. So on the whole, we've got to endorse that. We've got to keep doing it, making sure that if clubs are listening to this, make sure there's a space for them, that there's a referees, a changing room or a shower or a key for the door or whatever it is we might need, just to make our experience at their club a good thing. Because again, psychologically, if I go to a club and they're nice to me, that's going to carry on as soon as I step onto the field. Whether it's subliminal and whether it's real or not, I'm going to carry that on, and that's going to make me feel good. And it's amazing how many people don't think about what the referee might be thinking about, literally thinking about when they arrive at their club between them and kickoff, because that can make the difference between having a great 80 minutes and having a less great 80 minutes. Just pure, you're a psychologist, I'm not, but just having that experience is going to make me feel good, and I'm going to remember it next time. Same after the game. If you have a good experience or a positive experience, a welcoming experience, you're going to remember that next time. One of the things I always used to do in my spreadsheet, journal, whatever it is I used to make a note of names of people that I've spoken to, so that next time I go back to that club, I'm on first name terms, because I've just remembered who they are. I go to 40 different clubs, meet 80 different teams in the course of a season. The chances of me remembering a name are quite slim, but I will, because I've written it down, because I know I'm going to see them again next time, and we've got that personal interaction point. But then my background as a community, I'm a communicator by profession outside of rugby, which we didn't talk about earlier, but that's my baseline. I want to have a good relationship with as many people as I can, and I will use things like names to do that, particularly off field. We have to be careful when we're on field about not using too many names. I know some people don't like it. I've got a view on that as well. It's a different story for a different day, about how we get people to do what we want them to do. And I think using somebody's names to get them to do that is a really effective way of doing it. But there's then a perception about how many names a referee might use, and if it's only on one team and not the other, you've got to be really careful about perceptions rather than anything else.
Players have their role models, and Match officials are exactly the same. We see some great communicators in the game. Barnes being one, Owens being a very famous one, and we have our own superstar in Adam Leal, who's doing really well on the eye level stage. And it's great that we have those
Fantastic
people.
job.
It's also challenging for match officials and players seeing the eye level games and thinking it should transfer across to grassroots, but you're not seeing the same game on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday morning.
This is where I go hobby hat, job hat, and it flips around. I think we've actually got a much closer game than people talk about. I think we need to kind of accept that it's always been like that and always will be, because we're watching elite professionals running around with elite pressures and elite outcomes and elite benefits, doing stuff that we'd quite like to be doing as well in the community game. But when I watch international rugby or elite rugby on telly, I see all the same facets of the game that I will see on Sunday when I'm refereeing under 15s. We have scrums, we have lineouts, we have breakdowns, we have all the things, we have discipline, we have cards, we hopefully not on Sunday, but we have all the things that we see up north, at the top of the game, but played on different pitches with less skilled, less professional, less able people doing it. But we all aspire to be those players. And I think if you take anyone from the games that we'll referee this weekend and put them in an international game, they'll be playing the same game. So I kind of don't quite buy the international community game split in the same way that people sometimes talk about it. Yes, it's different because it happens at such high speed and such high contestabilities that we don't see in our games in community, that yes, it does look different and therefore it is refereed slightly differently. But fundamentally, a tackle at the top involves a tackler releasing the ball and the ball carrier doing something with the ball. When the ball goes into a scrum, there is generally some form of contest for it, and that will my tone and everyone's eyebrows have just raised in the same way. Would we like it to some of those real micro things be refereed more the same that we see throughout the game? Yes, we probably would, but sometimes we've got a balance at the top end of the game between spectacle and safety and getting people to watch, and some of those real things that I know some people get really hooked up on about in the community game. We just want the ball in play. We want players running around with the ball and trying to score tries and things like that, rather than some of the approach doesn't happen as much in the community game, and therefore people that have different pressures to get the same outcome. So we do have that balance to strike. And I totally understand that people have got elite versus community is such a vast difference, because there is a vast difference. They're elite professional athletes running around trying to play the game that we aren't. We are not elite athletes running around anymore in the games that we will officiate at the weekend, nor are the players. So therefore it is a slightly different, it's the same game played different. There's the soundbite version to get that to come through. And I think we should celebrate that. We all want to aspire to get to the elite game, but we also want the elite game players to come back down and play in the community. I did it from refereeing perspective. It's great. I remember still refereeing when I first started. There was an Irish international player called Kevin O'Brien who played for a local club in Manchester. He was captain of the seconds when I was coming out there. So I was a new kid on the block refereeing an ex-Irish international player who's on the down curve of his career. And I think that's brilliant. We see that all over the place as former internationals still running around in the same way that I would kind of hope that referees do as well. But the commitment, I know, I fully appreciate that many people put a massive investment into that game, and once they're done at that, it's really hard for them to move on. You talked to Emma last week about the kind of those pressures that those elite players have about what happens when their careers are coming to an end. I saw something on Instagram of another a Harlequins player, a female player, talking about that very subject at the moment. She's in that period of her career where she's still playing, but she's on the way back down, and she knows it, and how she balances that. And sometimes once you've invested all that time and effort into something, you need to stop. Hopefully you might come back a bit later. But we, again, appreciate people fall out of the game at the top and they want to do something else, or they need to move on with their lives in other areas. And that's rugby's done a great job for them, and they can move on to the next thing. Hopefully we'd kind of suggest that rugby is still there for them when they're ready to come back.
Not very much, and I'm glad you shared your thoughts on the discussion about international and grassroots. I think it's often a conversation post-game with coaches and players, because players often watch game clips and they go, oh, we saw England or Ireland or whatever do this specific move. That's what they try and practice in training. Well, match officials are no different. They'll see a match official, they'll see what
they try and emulate what they see, and they're just not capable of doing it. So therefore it doesn't work, and therefore we kind of get some of those disparities around the conversation that we might have. But I think it gives people something to do. And I've actually really seen some international stuff that's been even trialed and tested by players and in some innovations being tried at the community game. And I think it's brilliant. And we kind of put people innovating and looking at how the game is played, because we want a bit of variety out there.
So you talked earlier on about your journey and the levels that you refereed at. If you look at the modern game now and the timeline of development, grassroots, community game, National League, Championship, Premiership, and so on, is there enough scaffolding and key points within that development that allows match officials to take stock of where they're mentally at, so then they have that right balance between physical and mental preparedness?
There is certainly a lot of investment goes in the once you get into the national process structures around the world of psychological support for match officials, which I think is great. There wasn't anything like that when I was there, apart from the coach that we were given. That was the kind of usage we had. Certainly all the I'm fortunate to be in the room with our elite referee groups of both men and women. They've all got some form of psychological mental health support provision there if they need it. Not everyone needs it, not everyone wants it, and that's fine, but it's there. At least it's there, and they have that. I don't think that's the same across the elite game, across the community game, because the resources just aren't there. What does that look like? But there are some brilliant rugby charities out there focusing on exactly that. So I keep an eye on things like Looseheads, who do a great job in promoting mental health skills and giving people resilience tips and support if they need somebody to talk to. And we're often, one of your earlier episodes, was it Stuart talked about as a coach, talked about how isolating it can be for a coach out there, and coaches not having that peer support network and not having the mental health support network. So that was great to hear his version of that. I think there are a lot of referees do exactly the same thing, or go through exactly the same thing. It's part of the reason why I kind of wanted to develop the Facebook community for referees that we've got, whether it happens to be on Facebook. It's the rugby referee community that we've got there. We've got to say 5,000 people in there now, and it provides just that space for them to ask those questions that they perhaps don't have a support network for, or they just need an outlet to say, look, this happened today, I did this, could I have done something different? Did I get it right, or did I get it wrong? And sometimes we have to, that's the safe space for people to admit they got it wrong, and I'm just as one for that. You make a decision that ultimately turns out not to be right, as I learned from my experience in the past. So having that space to do that, and the support networks in whatever format that takes. And I always say, anyone out there who doesn't have someone locally and doesn't have that, just speak to somebody. There's always somebody out there who will be able to answer or steer or signpost you in the right direction if they can't help themselves. I mean, I've got no skills in helping people through mental health challenges at all, but I know people that do. And you kind of, I'm more of a signposter in that direction. But whatever community you're in, whatever part of the rugby sphere you fall under and fall in, there's somebody out there who will help and can help. And I think the more people know that and believe it and utilize it, the better for everybody. I think that's part of we talked about society problems earlier on. I think nowadays it's much more prevalent that there are people to go and speak to or get signposted for help for. I think rugby's great at that.
Your rugbyreferee.net community plus societies, that ability to interact and engage with fellow referees, especially if you're refereeing a game you haven't ref before, and you could talk to someone who's done that team, you have an idea to prepare yourself. But one of the biggest challenges we have with referees, recruitment's one thing, but also retention. By supporting each other better, it can help in that preparedness, but also in that deflation phase. You finish on a Sunday or a Saturday. Who do you speak to? What's your release? Are you just going home and then you'll living with those post-game thoughts? What do you think would be beneficial for referees in general, really, to help with that process?
I think certainly I've always benefited in the past of having those sort of small pod groups. We talk about those long car journeys when you kind of get up to the elite. You get onto development groups or panel groups, or we had a group that there was 7 of us went onto the panel at the same time. So we had a little group. There was a 7. We called it 7-Up Squad back in the pre-WhatsApp as it was. But we kind of used to ring round on the way home and from those journeys just to check in with each other and to make sure that we had that space to kind of ask questions or vent or say we had this problem or that that problem, or the other way around, say, look, this went really well today, and we had that space. And I think there's always going to be people like you in your society, you know, no matter who you are and what form you are, what level you're at, that where you can create those little pod groups. I think that's a really good outlet for it. And the other thing that I've kind of realized over time is having some form of journal. I mean, I created a journal for referees. I've actually just sold out of them for now, just as a test to see. I've done a lot through the corporate space. They talk about journaling as being a really value of actually writing down what you've done is a great way of getting it out of your head, because it's now on paper. And again, yellow egg, white yolk stuff. Once it's out and you can control it, then you've done it. And going through the process of putting pen on paper and evaluating yourself and thinking about stuff that you've done, what's worked well, what hasn't worked so well, just helps you to start to process that. So whether it's a phone call to a peer or a loved one who doesn't mind listening to you about rugby stuff, or it's a fellow ref who will always listen to you about rugby stuff, or writing it down. I think having some form of outlet to do that is really valuable process. And it's the feedback I've had from the journal is pretty good. So we'll see where that goes.
Appreciate that, and I do echo that. I did a game just before Christmas, and I had a good 3-hour drive back from Bury St Edmunds to Winchester, and I had the ability then to replay the game over and over. We're only human beings, we make errors, but also what's really key about this, and you mentioned it earlier on, you've also got to reward yourself. You know, you're the one, put yourself in that position. You can only do the best you can as long as you prepare yourself, you do the best you can in the game. You got to reward yourself and be proud of your performance.
Any game, it doesn't have to be a big game. Any game. We've just helped 36, 37, 38 people get a game of rugby, and that's what we're there to do. So any time we come off and a game has taken place, there's a tick in our box as a referee. Whether it went well or not, separate. We can add loads of other marks if we want, but that should always be, did rugby happen, and did everyone make it off the pitch at the end? So that's two ticks to start with.
The reason behind this podcast is to share my life experiences, military veteran, through the use of academia, give me the support to then share my message of movement is important. If you need to see a GP for mental health therapies and so on, that's key. Get that help. Movement's also got to be part of the mechanisms of you feeling better. Rugby is a great avenue. I've been a player, coach, and also a match official. But if you think about yourself being a match official, be it on the Sunday, the championship, or whatever level, how does that shape you as an individual, being a match official?
I mean, literal shape, obviously. The amount of fitness work that we have to do at the top end is one way of literally shaping us in a positive way. I think the more non-literal way is, look, it just gives you that ability to kind of talk to people on a one basis and kind of facilitate that game that they've done and be part of that process. And I think that's, for me, that's the type of makeup I am. I'm a sort of communicator, collaborator, individual. You see I can't see my blocks, but I've got my personality profile blocks up on the shelf behind me. As a yellow-green people person, then that's how I'm built and structured, and I know that. So I get a lot of my energy around being people and helping people do what they want to do. So that's, for me, refereeing is part of that. It's not because of that, but it's always helped. So I think that has done that. And I think for me personally, look, rugby has clearly shaped me as an individual, because I wouldn't, without rugby, I wouldn't have turned a hobby into a job and being in the privileged seat that I sit in from a day job perspective. But also I think it wouldn't have enabled me for my hobby as a referee. It wouldn't have helped me to develop the next generation of rugby players or referees coming through. Because without that career that we've had and I've had, then we wouldn't have all those tools and things that we've been through, all those things that we've worked through as individuals that we can now pass on to the next generation. And I love that about the game. I love the fact that I can help referee a game, and we've got 30 under 15s, under 16s, whatever it might, coming back next week because they've enjoyed their rugby. They want to keep playing. They want to be part of the game that we all love. And I think we have a great role to play that. And that, for me, that's part of how that shapes me. And it also, it just helps the day job. For me, I have a seat at the table. Whether anyone listens to my voice is different. I'm not there to have a voice, but then to facilitate. But being able to say, look, if we're talking about this issue of the game and the laws of the game, I have to go out on Sunday and referee on my own. So therefore, can we referee it? Is it the right thing for the game? You do talk about international community earlier on. Then I have that role to play, and I think rugby has shaped me to be able to do that and be in the various seats with the various hats that I might have on at any particular time.
You talked a little bit of your your full-time job, your main role. I was being a match official with teams to manage. Does that help you or does that influence you in your job? And can you just share a little bit about what your role is with World Rugby?
Start with the second bit. Yeah. So my day job, I'm the laws coordinator. So I am literally responsible for the law book and the laws assets that the game has. So I've this morning published the 2026 law book on the World Rugby website. So that's sort of literally the products that we have as a suite of tools and those sorts of things. But then the great chunk of time is about supporting both the elite referee groups around the world and then working with the game of in all its forms. In what the laws of the game look like. So what is in the law book is there's a whole governance process around how we get the laws that we get and how we've ended up with the law books of the past as it's developed over time. So there's a big governance process that goes through with our 120, how many members we got now across the world. The World Rugby Council delegations from all over the world sit on council, and it's them that decide what actually gets put into law. It's not just me and a couple of other people have an idea and suddenly it gets into the law book. If only it was like that, we could probably solve some other problems. But we're a game that's played all over the world in many different forms and many different countries. So we have to World Rugby is a sport federation, so we're made up of our members, and therefore it's the membership that builds into that. So being literally responsible for those, being at the port of call when we're looking. I'm only a couple of years into this and working through what that process looks like and all the governance that sits behind it and the processes that we have to do on the technology and printing and the apps and all that kind of stuff. The big thing is how I can bring the history and the social side of my life into the day job is that I've been there and I have to referee it. As I said before, we can have all these laws in play, or we could say, well, we want to do this in this particular game, but for the women's game we might do that. For junior rugby we're going to do that, and I'm going to sit there and say, well, over a weekend I might referee a men's game on a Friday night, a women's game on a Saturday, and an age grade game at the weekend. Referees all over the world will be doing that thing. They'll be refereeing different ages, different genders, different forms, different levels of the game throughout a 3-day window of a weekend. So we need to try and make sure that we've got laws that can be applied by me on my own doing those 3 different games easily, as well as Ben O'Keefe and Luke Pearce on Saturday with their teams of 3 plus a TMO plus an FPRO plus all the support network they've got with them on a particular game. So that's kind of what I bring into the day job, to have that lens and just to make sure that when we're thinking about ideas or we see people have got this, how can it actually be refereed and how do we talk about it? How do I literally take an idea that somebody has and is going through a process, and how do the words that I put into the law book or we get written that will eventually go into the law book, do they make sense to me as a referee? Does it make sense to you? Does it make sense to a broadcaster trying to talk about the games? There's lots of different elements that make up the role and all the stuff that kind of all my experience have done that, and I have that kind of seat and sway. I don't like to sway because it's the wrong thing to say, but I kind of have that chance to say, look, this is what you're saying this, and we think it's a really good idea. But in the reality of referees, this is what it might look like. Talking to players at my level, the folk that we referee, men's and women's, we kind of take that. I absorb that information. If I've got this idea, I might say to our women's team on the Wednesday night training, so look, we're just thinking about this. What's your first reaction? And I get a hot debrief, if you like, from a player. What's their instant reaction on that? What's the first thing a coach thinks about when I say we're not going to have not straights in the line out anymore? What does the coach think? And the coach says, I'm just going to throw it to 9. So we don't want that, because that's not we're literally bypassing the line out. So I need to put into law that it has to go in. The ball still has to be thrown to the players in the line out, because coaches are looking to innovate in the game. They're looking at the laws as well, hopefully, and trying to find the holes in that will benefit their game and how it can be refereed. So lots of different opportunities to have those rugby conversations that I can then kind of take that thought into the meetings and conversations that we might have through the process.
Does the feedback from coaches, players and match officials around the world feed in, and what impact does that on decision making when it comes to amending laws, improving laws or changing laws?
It's a really important element. We've got to make sure that whenever we do stuff, and this is the benefit of having trial, we have different forms of trials where we try new laws out before they go into full law. As part of that evaluation process, we will always ask coaches, players, referees about that. When we last did a whole bunch of them, the last bunch of proper law trials, we did a community survey that had, I think, 4,500 people responded from all over the world. Not everyone, and I would always like that number to be much, but we've got a good chunk. We can divvy that feedback up, and it's just a survey that says, what did you think about this? Did you like it? If you're a referee, could you referee it? If you're a player, did it have any difference? And then we can also marry that. So we can marry that information up. We can look at the game data metrics that come up with it. We can look at injury data that comes off the back of it. There's always a lag on injury data as it's reported around the world to make sure that we're not doing something that can create a player welfare problem, because that's like the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. Or if we've got player injury data that says we need to do this, what's the reverse of that, and how do we then referee? We saw that with the croc roll a couple of years ago. In the game, players were coming to us and say, look, we're having really bad career-ending injuries being caused by this action, and the game has quite rightly said, we don't want any of that. We need to stop it right now. So we could write it into law really cleanly to say that's it. That's the opposite of the direction of travel. So you have an injury thing that we fix, and it stops it. Or we look at game stuff that we have to make sure fan feedback, player feedback, referee feedback, plus injury data, plus game metrics. What does that do? And when we've got all that information, it goes through the decision-making process, through the committees, and then to World Rugby Council for approval. So that's a whole chunk of stuff that lots of people don't see before it ends up on our feet for you and I to then have to go and referee the following season or whenever it might come into law.
The big area of the game, the tackle, and one real controversy around tackle is tackle height, especially now with the increase of concussions in the game. I think rugby's doing some part to try and resolve that issue. For people watching, listening, people who might be allowing the children to play the game for the first time, what can you say to maybe put some people at ease about what World Rugby are doing regarding the tackle height and the laws around that, and what we are doing as match officials, be it in a team of three or on our own on a weekend? How can we then help to mitigate the tackle?
Yeah, I mean, tackle height is one of those issues that we're trying to fix as a game, because obviously we recognise that leaving players after our game with head injuries and long-term issues is not something that anyone wants to do. Over time, we have really seen the benefit of a number of different, what we might call levers, being used to try and effect change. And law is one way of doing that. So we've seen that in the community game of trials around the world being changed to either the sternum or its waist in France. And that is already having an impact in the injury level. So we are seeing concussions starting to fall. We are seeing players, the game being changed by that. I was talking to somebody over the weekend about the French elite game is actually now benefiting from their community tackle height changes that they made 5 years ago, because in France they've got their tackle height is at the waist, so therefore as players are going in with carrying the ball and they're being tackled low, they've got a real chance to offload the ball much more freely. And that's now being seen 5 years later as the players have progressed into the elite game as a real benefit in French rugby. So sometimes it takes a while for these things to come through. In other areas where we haven't seen a law change, the analysis that's being done is already starting to show that tackle height is still coming down even in the elite game without a law change. So we're starting to see different levers being used, and we're seeing the same benefits coming down, because we as you say, we want to attract people into our game, and therefore we need to make it as safe as possible, but without completely changing the game from rugby union, which I think we said about an hour ago, about how we start. We don't want to change rugby union from not being rugby union. So it still needs to look and feel like the sport we do, but in as safe a way as possible, whilst appreciating that we're a collision sport. And actually some people here, we're a collision sport, and will instantly argue with you and say we're an evasion sport. And so we should be running away from contact, not into it. And that's just a coaching and playing mantra that people have. That's not, we describe it however we want, but we've got to make sure that if we are colliding with each other, we're moving heads out of head and shoulder spaces. So there's a lot of work being done to analyse what is happening and what has the impact of that has been. Can we do more? Quite possibly. But then we get into the debate and the discussions that we have in public now about it's now spoiling the game because it's an act of foul play, and therefore it needs refereeing, and therefore TMOs can come into it, the TV game. We have too many interruptions. So we're constantly trying to find the balance between safety and spectacle, of not doing something that will damage either at the expense of the other. So it's an ongoing challenge. Look, the game has been changing for 100 years and it will keep changing. That's for the good or not, well, it is up to our future versions of us to tell. But I think we've all got to work really hard. Players and coaches have just as much a role to play in this. as referees do. So if we can coach and play with lower tackle height, then it takes us out of the game. And I say that to players all the time. Make it not my problem. If you tackle lower, then I don't get involved. If you're not going to tackle upright, and we still have people in our game that I would call the uprighters, people who tackle by staying upright and let somebody run into you and tackle from there. Well, that's putting your head in a fast-moving head space. You are at fault there, and therefore, so look, that uprighter can change their behaviour if they put their mind to it and come down into that space. And the implication, the knock-on, in fact, is that if the tackle height's coming down, what's the ball carrier doing? And in some, again, France have got laws against the ball carrier dropping. We've got slightly nuanced version of that in England. Other countries don't have that. So we're looking at all those things to balance out across the game to see what works best or what's working well, not best or better. And then the game's got, I guess, we'll end up in a space where we may end up having unions deciding for themselves as to which tackle height to apply. There's a long answer there. We want rugby to be safe for people to play because we want new people, we want kids, boys and girls to come into our game and play rugby, and we want to do that, and they want to play that for a long period of time. So therefore, we've got to make it as safe as we can, whilst recognising that we're a collision and evasion sport. The other thing that I talk about a lot with this kind of work hat on is that we're developing new forms of the game as well. We've never really had a non-contact version of rugby. We've developed T1 as something from a World Rugby level that we've given to unions to do, which is a non-contact version of rugby, but still looks like rugby union. It still has a 3 versus 3 upright scrum, and it still has a line, what looks like a line out on the side. So there's lots of things that are being done to kind of help the game develop, but also give new opportunities, new forms of rugby for people who don't perhaps want to play the full contact version of the game. So, the other thing we're doing in from World Rugby's perspective is developed a non-contact version of rugby for people to either use in training or to use as a tool to attract people into rugby clubs and onto rugby fields. So it's if you look at touch rugby, if you were to walk past that and see a game of touch rugby going on, you'd look at it and go, oh, that's not rugby, it's rugby league or whatever it is. T1 is non-contact, so it's still touch, but when you have a touch, we create a breakdown, still non-contact, no competition, but it kind of takes people out of the game. We still have scrums if for a knock-on or a forward pass. We still have a line-out, non-contact, no competition for it, but we're developing just these versions of the game that people can play either as a training tool or as a way of attracting more people into our rugby clubs to run around with a rugby ball in the hand in something that looks and feels like rugby. So T1 is something that listeners might have seen around England, in Wales, it's being used in Wales, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand are starting to do it in different forms in different and lots of developing countries. So the first time I saw it go big was in China. They're using it for their elderly, their seniors' way of keeping seniors moving in a rugby environment. Laos in the Far East have used it to develop their women and girls game in bringing that, and they've had it in their national championship for the first time there. So it's great that rugby's being played in something that looks and feels like rugby, but hasn't got that contact element that perhaps people might be concerned about. So there's lots of different things going on to kind of keep people in the game, to keep the normal game that we associate as being rugby as safe as possible, but also give people a new version of rugby if they want it.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure listeners will be interested to see how they can get involved with the variation to the game. It might keep people staying active in a different way.
And the other thing it will do, just to labour the point, going back to the refereeing, is it then gives new referees and recruits to refereeing a way of being involved, but without the tricky stuff that we as dyed-in-the-wool refs know is tricky. We don't have to deal with 8 versus 8 scrums. We've got 3 people standing looking at each other. No one has to do anything, but I still have to set that scrum. I have to position myself around the scrum. I have to run away from it. So all the tools that we do as referees, you could learn using T1 before you move into a contact game. So I think in time, it'll actually be a good referee development tool as well.
So if we build up towards the World Cup, what do you anticipate seeing with a match official's head on in relation to preparing for the competition? What excites you about it?
And I think as long as we get games that are competitive, that are good products, we use that phrase. I'm not a huge fan of that, but what happens on the field is good and entertaining. We want elite rugby being played at a top level with full stadium, with lots of crowd involvement, lots of player involvement with the crowd. So that's any ambition for a World Cup is going to be based around those couple of things.
Keith, thank you very much for for sharing your time with us today. If you could share a message to someone who may be starting as a new match official this Saturday, might be nervous, a little bit anxious about going out there for the first time, what would be your message to that individual?
I just have the belief in yourself that you can do it. If you're in that position, you've done the work, you've already made the decision to do it. So you've done your prep, you've done your course, whatever that looks like. Just get over that white line and let the people play rugby. So believe you can do it, because you can. There are 30 other people there who are going to play their part in doing that.
Thank you very much for joining us today. I see refereeing is a great tool for confidence, a way of communication, self-regulation of our own anxieties and our mental preparations, especially when supported properly. So if you're listening to this podcast today, be it a player, coach, or a parent, remember this, that there's no games without match officials. If you're an official, no matter what level you're at, or whoever you may know, please thank a referee, thank a match official on the weekend, be it a Saturday or Sunday. Challenge your poor behaviour on the sidelines and engage one person to try officiating. More importantly, support the individual in the middle and support your local referees. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's more than a conversation. You've shared some of your insights, be it on the world stage with the World Rugby refereeing laws, or your own personal journey, be it the championship or at grassroots level, especially the U16s on the Sunday. I just also want to give you a personal thank you for today, but also the engagement and the sharing of your knowledge on Hampshire Referee Society's monthly meetings, and also sharing your rugbyreferee.net community on Facebook. Your insight is very helpful. Your knowledge is important. Helps referees such as myself and the new referees grow with confidence each weekend. Grassroots sport survives because people like Keith care enough to show up. Officials don't just manage games, to protect communities, standards, and the opportunity for others to grow, and that matters. If this episode resonates with you, please share, like, and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or Amazon Podcasts. You can also follow me on my YouTube channel, James Alder 03, where you can watch the full video. You can also follow my Substack at Transformation Through Training, where I give weekly newsletters showing you help guide on how to use movement to support your own mental health journey. If you would like to continue supporting this podcast, you can do so by buying me a coffee. The link is in the description box below. Thank you for joining us. Remember, movement is good for you, it's good for me, and it's good for us all. Use movement to support your own mental health, one step, one movement at a time. See you on the next one.